Summer can be a bit of a slog. For us, it's often for some reason a rather busy time, and I'm sure we're not alone.
Well, you can beat the summertime sadness and the August angst and enhance your everyday with our excellent sponsor, Via Hemp. This is a company that crafts award-winning premium THC and THC-free gummies.
Each of these gummies is especially designed to cultivate a specific mood. Whether you're looking to get relaxed, get quality sleep, get creative, or just to get focused. If you're 21 or older, you can experience it for yourself and get 15% off your first order with our exclusive code MSheet at viahemp.com. That's VIIAHEMP.com.
I personally enjoyed their grapefruit flow state gummies. This CBG and CBD powerhouse really helped me tap into my productivity. Like, we have had an extremely busy summer, and I feel flow state got me over the finish line a few times when I was editing multiple episodes a day, digging through documents, and knocking out a bunch of interviews.
Via Hemp does not require a medical card, and it ships legally to all 50 states. It's also affordable, and even more so for Murder Sheet listeners who get a special deal.
If you're 21 and older, head to viahemp.com and use code MSheet to receive 15% off. That's VIIAHEMP.com and use code MSheet at checkout. After you purchase, they ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Enhance your everyday with Via.
This season, Instacart has your back to school. As in, they've got your back to school lunch favorites, like snack packs and fresh fruit. And they've got your back to school supplies, like backpacks, binders, and pencils. And they've got your back when your kid casually tells you they have a huge school project due tomorrow. Let's face it, we were all that kid. So first call your parents to say I'm sorry, and then download the Instacart app to get delivery in as fast as 30 minutes all school year long. Get a $0 delivery fee for your first 3 orders while supplies last. Minimum $10 per order. Additional terms apply.
This episode is sponsored by AutoTrader. Credit scores, down payments, interest rates. Car buying can be a numbers game, but you don't have to be a math expert to get the keys to your dream car. Just use Kelley Blue Book My Wallet on AutoTrader. Crunch your numbers and get your personalized results so you know exactly how much you'll pay each month for your car. It's like having a magic wand for your wallet. Presto! The car you've been wanting is now within reach. So hit the road and leave your calculator at home. Find your next car on autotrader.com.
Content warning. This episode includes discussion of murder.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning into the cheat sheet today. We have 3 cases that we're going to talk about. 2 we've covered before. 1 is completely new to us. 1 is based in Indiana, another in Idaho, and the 3rd in Ohio. So let's get started.
My name is Anya Kane. I'm a journalist.
And I'm Kevin Greenlee. I'm an attorney.
And this is The Murder Sheet.
We're a true crime podcast focused on original reporting, interviews, and deep dives into murder cases. We're The Murder Sheet.
And this is the cheat sheet. Paupers and Publicity. So today we're going to start off with the case of Joshua Farmer. This is a man who is accused of gunning down and murdering his ex-wife, Kayla Farmer. Now, this is a pretty horrifying case. Joshua Farmer is accused of exhibiting stalking behavior, stalking this woman who was the mother of his children. And prior to this incident, also physically abusing her and at least one of their children.
And this is a case we covered on an earlier cheat sheet, if I recall correctly.
That's correct. We went into depth on the PCA and sort of everything that happened.
Can you give us just the big picture overview of what he did?
So he followed her to a gas station in Fishers, Indiana, and she was shot dead while she was sitting in the driver's seat of her town and country van. This was at a Speedway gas station near 116th and Allisonville. She was shot many, many times. I believe it like around 15 times. And
this happened last summer.
Farmer became a fugitive after that and was later arrested. One thing that people should keep in mind with this case is that Kayla was a witness against him in the case of physical abuse against her and one of their sons. So when somebody who is a witness or who is involved in bringing charges against a perpetrator, a defendant, is murdered by said defendant, courts take that more seriously because
that's a threat to the integrity of the justice system.
If somebody can just get rid of the problems, the legal troubles they're having by killing witnesses, then, as Kevin said, that undermines everything.
And I've got to say, one of the details about this crime that always stuck out to me was after he brutally murders Kayla, he calls his girlfriend and tells her that he took care of it.
Yeah.
And she says, what do you mean? He says, oh, we don't need to get into that. So that has certainly a very cold and cavalier attitude about the death of this woman.
Yeah, the mother of his children, and he's texting people, like, took care of the problem. Like, it's like you need to go, do an errand or something. It's definitely horrifying and just very cold-blooded, the way this was done. Yeah, I mean, this is also in the context of domestic violence that was allegedly happening within this relationship in front of children. One incident happened where he allegedly pointed a gun at Kayla and their oldest child. So, this was unfortunately a pervasive pattern of abuse that, seemingly led to this horrific conclusion. So what's going on in this case? Well, there's been a couple of updates that I wanted to flag with our audience. Also, sorry if my voice sounds weird. We're both kind of getting over some sort of head cold situation. So January 22nd, 2024, the judge on this case is the Honorable David K. Najjar of Hamilton County Superior Court 5. Hope I'm saying his name right. He granted a motion for an attorneys-only conference on January 24th. The two deputy prosecuting attorneys on this are Mark Livingston and Mary Lena Hutchinson. And at that time, the defense attorneys were Joshua Moody and Grace Atwater. I'm hoping I'm saying Mr. Moody's name right. If not, I apologize. Those two defense attorneys were from Kamen and Moody, which is an Indianapolis law firm. So from what I can tell, this was private counsel. From what I can tell at the court, from the court documents. They'd both been on the case since July 26, 2023. But sort of seemingly after this attorneys only conference, they did a filing saying that they told Farmer of their intention to withdraw, and he agreed. And they asked for indigent counsel to be appointed. So my understanding essentially is that he could not afford private counsel anymore. Is that what we kind of read in between the lines there?
Sure. And jumping ahead a bit, he was appointed. He did receive an appointed counsel, Lisa Manning, at the end of February. But prior to her appointment, there was another interesting development in the case. Because this case involved the murder of a witness against the defendant, as you noted, prosecutors took that very, very seriously. It also involved shooting a victim with a gun from a vehicle. These are aggravating factors, and the prosecutor requested the death penalty.
Yes, the prosecutor of Hamilton County, Indiana, which is the county to the north of Indianapolis, is Greg Garrison, and he requested initially that this be a death penalty case.
But he changed his mind.
Yes, he changed his mind. So on February 21st, 2024, he requested that the death sentence request be altered to actually be life without parole. And he, in the filing, noted that the requirements for both are the same. Number one, shooting a victim from a vehicle, and number two, the victim being a witness against the defendant. So he's saying same stuff, but we want a different penalty. So, I mean, the death penalty, obviously it's a highly politicized issue sometimes, but in addition to that, the death penalty is very cumbersome. It's unwieldy. It's a lot of things go into it. There's a lot of automatic appeals, and some critics of the death penalty feel that it just kind of drags things out even more, sometimes for the victims' families. So we don't know what internal discussions happened here. Is this, why exactly did Garrison do that? It's not necessarily clear, but there can be problems with the death penalty that don't necessarily speak to the seriousness of the crime, but do speak to practical matters. And sometimes that can go into a DA's thinking. I imagine also sometimes maybe family members of the victim don't really want the death penalty. Maybe that goes into it too. I just don't know. We don't know what happened here. But it's no longer a death penalty case. And one thing I found a bit odd and maybe a little bit archaic in terms of the language, when I downloaded the file about attorney Lisa Manning coming in as the new attorney, like the file or something, I think read as like pauper counsel or pauper filing or something. Pauper meaning, I suppose, someone who doesn't have any money, but I guess that's maybe one of the older terms for that. But essentially, it's public defense. And I don't know. I feel like in true crime, public defenders often get slammed a lot. Like, they're not good. And we've talked to a lot of public defenders on the show, on the record, but also behind the scenes. And those people are doing excellent work in many cases for not a lot of money. And I just feel like in many cases, I don't know, I just want to say something nice about them because I feel like they're underappreciated. It's very easy to kind of celebrate the flashy private defense. And listen, a lot of them are great. And oftentimes structurally, they can dedicate more time to a case than an overworked public defender's office. But that doesn't mean that we should be saying that public defenders are bad on true crime podcasts, because often they're just incredible public servants and they're doing a hard job. Shout out to the public defenders. Sorry. I just feel like you do hear this kind of weird snobbery from like people who don't know what they're talking about in true crime, where they're like, oh, it's a public defender, so it's not going to be good.
Well, and let's talk about Delphi for just a second. Andy Baldwin and Brad Rosie are public defenders for Richard Allen, but they also are private attorneys for a number of other clients.
Right. There could be
the quality of work
Yeah.
they're doing for their public defense clients, such as Richard Allen, is comparable to the quality of work they give to their private clients.
That's a really good point. In some situations, there's private defense who can also contract out to be public defenders. So it's not always as clear-cut as one thinks. So that's what's happening with the Farmer case in Indiana. We'll be following that with interest. Definitely a very disturbing case. The jury trial is currently set for October 7th, 2024. But now I'd say let's move on to certainly a higher profile case that we've been covering. I don't think the Farmer case has gotten a lot of national attention, but this one certainly has. And actually, that's kind of one of the things that we'll be discussing today is pretrial publicity. And this is, of course, the case against Bryan Kohberger, who is the defendant in Idaho. He is accused of murdering 4 University of Idaho students, Kaylee Gonsalves, Madison Mogan, Ethan Chapin, and Xana Kernodle. Very scary, horrifying case. The prosecution is saying this is a stranger who showed up at these students' house, got inside, and murdered 4 of them. The defense is obviously going to be fighting for Kohberger and saying, maybe there's someone else who did it.
And as part of their efforts to fight for Kohberger, as you put it, they, back in the end of January, his defense attorney, Ann Taylor, requested a change of venue.
Yes. So maybe, Kevin, you can talk a bit about what are the issues around pretrial publicity? Why might you request a change of venue?
Well, I think the key thing to remember is that there are very specific evidentiary rules about what sort of matters can be brought into a trial and what sort of matters are not allowed to be brought in. And you want the jurors who are deciding someone's fate to be basing that decision only upon what they hear in court, only based upon evidence that's been properly admitted and ruled to be fit by the judge. You don't want them basing their opinions on things they may have heard in the street, maybe things they heard on a podcast, maybe things they read in a newspaper. And so this becomes an issue when you have cases that get a lot of publicity. If you have a case in a relatively small area that becomes notorious in that area and everybody's talking about it, and you hear it on the radio, you hear it on TV, it's in the papers, a lot of information about that is circulating, which is probably not all 100% accurate, or even if it's accurate, maybe it's things that shouldn't be admitted into court. And you don't want that sort of thing, those sorts of details rattling around in the minds of potential jurors. And so because of this, you would often have defense attorneys say, we need to have the trial take place somewhere else. We need to have the trial take place in an area where people aren't talking about it so much, so it'll be easier for us to find jurors who are unbiased, who haven't heard about the case.
Really well said. If you have a defendant, if there's a bunch of media articles that are completely accurate and are just about like, this guy's a freaky little guy, he's going around and doing weird stuff and creeping people out, that's not against the law. And that's not something that is going to be brought up in court, most likely, unless it really directly touches upon the crimes. So that's something that's what Kevin is talking about. Like, if Kevin's accused of murder and then there's a bunch of local news articles like, this guy is a jerk and a bad tipper, like that's, which is not true, obviously, but also you're not a murderer. But that's the sort of thing that could bias a juror.
Okay, it's time to commit. 2024 is the year for prioritizing yourself. Begin your new smile journey with Byte, and you could start seeing results in just 2 to 3 weeks. Just order your at-home impression kit today for only $14.95 at Byte.com. Byte clear liners are doctor-directed and delivered to your door. Treatment costs thousands less than braces, plus they offer financing options, accept eligible insurance, and you could pay with your HSA, FSA. Get 80% off your impression kit when you use code WONDERY at Byte.com. That's BYTE.com. Start your confidence journey today with Byte. What makes a life a good one? Is it the adventure you have? Or the friends you find along the way? Maybe it's pursuing your passion while striving to protect, defend, and save what you believe in every single day. So what makes a life a good one? In the Coast Guard, we think it's all of the above and more. But you'll have to find out for yourself. Visit gocoastguard.com to learn more.
You've worked hard to build your brand, so why settle for one-size-all-fits branded clothing? Lands' End Outfitters creates apparel your employees will truly want to wear, all backed by above-and-beyond expertise. See why Lands' End Outfitters has been a branded apparel supplier to some of the world's most respected brands for more than 30 years. Go to business.landsend.com/pod20 and use code POD20 for 20% off your first product. That's business.landsend.com/pod20, code POD20 for 20% off your first product.
Hypothetically. That being said, in our modern day media environment, it's becoming a bit difficult to escape some of that pretrial publicity. It used to be that you could get out of your county. Well, now people around here aren't getting whatever newspaper you would get. So maybe they're not focusing on the trial as much. So maybe they're coming into this cold.
Even a state as small as Indiana has different media markets. You have the Indianapolis media market in the middle of the state. You have a media market more associated with Chicago in the northern part of the state. You have media markets more associated with Louisville down in the southern parts of the state. And so if you have a crime that's getting a lot of attention, say in the middle of the state, Indianapolis is covering it a lot, you could just go north or south and you'd be able to find jurors in the old days who wouldn't hear about it. But now with a case like Delphi or with a case like Idaho, it gets attention everywhere.
When it comes to information nowadays, in some ways we're all like some like Roman emperor who can kind of order someone to come over and feed us grapes. We can get exactly what we want when we want it. We can easily follow different cases, more so than I think that's always been a human impulse to want to follow the cases. That's why newspapers, in the 20th century, in the early 20th century, was so salacious and kind of crazy. But I think now it's easier for anybody to do that with the internet. So they could move it a couple counties over in Idaho. I still think there might be some issues. And I think that's just kind of the reality now. I think it's going to be important as long as voir dire works out and they make sure that they don't get anyone who has some sort of bias. But
so what's interesting is the defense said we need to have a fair trial for Mr. Kohberger. We need a change of venue. We think the jurors here are going to have their minds basically filled with stuff maybe they shouldn't be considered in the trial. We need to go elsewhere. And they make these assertions, and then the state responded to that, basically saying, let's not be super hasty. They're saying it takes more than just asserting that the people in a particular county would be biased. We need to have some sort of evidence that supports that. They're saying, let's wait until maybe a trial starts and we start trying to find a jury. And then if that happens and prospective jurors are indeed found to be biased, then maybe. That was basically their response.
That's exactly right. And one thing we should note that is a little bit more nuanced and has less to do with the internet and more to do with maybe the old-fashioned view of pretrial publicity. I can see where Ann Taylor, she's the lead public defender on Kohberger's case. I can see where her team is coming from in regards to the question of interconnectedness of the local community. Latah County is where the University of Idaho is. I imagine, like many sort of college towns, Moscow has a lot of people who are connected to the university. You know, either they work there or they have a job that touches upon there, or they serve a lot of students and academics who live there, or they, you know, there's this ecosystem where the university is at the heart of everything. And from the defense's perspective, they may be looking at it like, you know, I mean, if anyone's gone to a college who's listening, you know, and some of your peers are murdered, or, you know, if you work at a college and some of the students there are murdered, that's a very upsetting and traumatic thing for that community. It brings up a lot of strong emotions. And if you're on the defense, you might be thinking, we don't want them to just like go for this guy because he's accused of this. And maybe people who are not directly connected to the university might be more removed, might be more, you know, able to kind of separate their emotions. That is something that I could see them arguing. I don't really know how relevant that is, because I imagine in most situations, people don't want to just go for the first guy who gets accused. They want to go where the evidence is. Regardless, it's not justice if the wrong guy goes to prison. But it's the defense's job to be more conservative about that and to be arguing for him. So I can see where they're coming from with that.
Yeah, certainly. I think any competent defense attorney in this situation would make a request for a change of venue. Like you're talking about Delphi, you know, Rosie and Baldwin requested a change of venue there. It's a basic move when you have a high-profile case.
Yeah, it also gets it on the record that you're concerned about pretrial publicity. And this defense team has been very concerned about pretrial publicity. They've fought against cameras in the courtroom. They've accused the press of really kind of villainizing their client. So they're pretty unhappy with this, with the amount of scrutiny that this case has gotten.
Yeah, and understandably so. Certainly, all of us who've been following this case are certainly aware there's been a lot of reports out there, some I'm sure completely accurate, some completely fictitious, some anywhere in between, where people talk about Kohberger, their alleged interactions with him. What was he like? How did he treat women? How did he do this? How did he do this? And a lot of this is unverifiable gossip. And you don't want that sort of thing in the minds of jurors who are deciding his ultimate fate.
Absolutely.
It seems counterintuitive. I think we pointed this out before, but those of us who are super interested in true crime and are super interested in particular cases, we should never be on juries about these cases because we have absorbed a lot of information about these cases, including information that for one reason or another would not be admitted in court. And so it would not be appropriate for us to be on these juries. You want someone whose mind is clear.
Yeah. And that sounds, again, I've heard podcasters, true crime podcasters say stuff like, well, that seems bad because then the people who know the least are on the... It's like, no, it's because people are humans, and humans, we get a lot of information. We come to some strong conclusions. We often become a bit biased. That's not because we're bad or stupid or anything. It's just natural. You know, you okay, well, this guy sounds like he's guilty, or this guy sounds like he's totally innocent. And when you're dealing with people who are hearing the facts for the first time, those people are able to set aside any sort of... They don't have any biases to set aside. They're just coming into it cold, and they're hearing about it, and they're hearing about the right information. They're hearing about the facts that are introduced at court, and it makes for a fairer process. So I used to have more of the opinion that I just shared of those true crime podcasters, where it's like, well, why shouldn't people who know a lot about it be, you know, they're the experts. Oftentimes they're not, because they're consuming a lot of information that actually would never be admitted at trial, and therefore it would just bias the whole process. So, you know, it's not certainly far from a perfect system, but I think it makes sense when you actually see it in process, because it's imperative that things are fair. And, you know, when you have a lot of people who feel like they kind of already have made up their minds, then it's not as fair. So another thing happening in the Kohberger case is more stuff about DNA. And we are going to get some experts on here to talk about some of this, because I don't feel we're science people, and I would love to get more of that information from the experts and sort of discuss it and present it in that way. So hopefully we can make that happen soon. Kohberger's team requested that defense experts, namely Dr. Leah Larkin, Becca Barlow, and Stephen Mercer, have access to materials that are sort of like sealed right now around the DNA. And each of these people has some sort of expertise around DNA. Dr. Leah Larkin, she came up in the past in past filings. She runs the DNA Geek. She has a PhD, and she, you know, this is kind of a DNA analysis firm. So she's working with the defense. Becca Barlow is an attorney, and she is an attorney who specializes in DNA related cases. She was the DNA attorney for the San Francisco Public Defender's Office in the early 2000s, and does private practice now, but she delves very heavily into DNA cases. And Stephen Mercer is a Maryland... Oh, and Barlow is from California. And Stephen Mercer is a Maryland attorney, and he also is very focused on DNA. His website notes that, quote, significantly, the scope of Steve's experience extends beyond a challenge to the methodology at issue to include assessing every avenue of litigation to block or neutralize DNA/forensic science evidence. All of this speaks clearly to trying to do everything they can to tear down the DNA evidence in the case. DNA ties Kohberger to the scene, so it's very important for the defense to, if they can't get it thrown out, then do everything they can to discredit it in the eyes of the jury.
That's what they need to do to get him acquitted.
Yeah, I would think that would be very important towards getting him acquitted. And in addition to that, so the state is saying that I think they were okay with Larkin, Barlow, and Mercer getting access, but there was also some reference to like criminal investigators getting access, I believe. And the state was saying like, well, you need to name them and like explain why they need it. So there's going to be a hearing. There was a hearing on this on February 28th, and Judge John Judge has declined to give the unnamed criminal investigators more access to the investigative genetic genealogy material. And he's basically, his reasoning is like, give it to the people that we've already approved of, Larkin, Mercer, and Barlow, and then, give us more examples on what you need to show investigators and why. He's keeping an open mind, is what he says. So investigative genetic genealogy is very important to both the prosecution, but also the defense, because if they can knock some of it down, then they have an easier path towards acquittal.
So there's also a very interesting case going on in our neighboring state of Ohio.
Yes, this is the disappearance and murder of Cheryl Coker. This case took place in Riverside, Ohio. That is a city in Montgomery County. And this is a suburb of the city of Dayton, Ohio, which is in the western part of the state.
So Cheryl Coker was going through a bit of a contentious divorce from William Coker.
That's correct. So William Coker and Cheryl Coker had been married for 19 years. They had a 15-year-old daughter together. In September of 2018, she filed for divorce, specifically on September 21st. And this was noted in the Dayton Daily News, just as a little, sometimes they list divorces happening. And it was, by some media accounts, becoming a bit contentious. She wanted custody of her daughter and spousal support. And in addition to that, there were other people involved in this breakup of the marriage. Cheryl was aware that William was cheating on her. He was with a girlfriend. He had a girlfriend. And she herself apparently met a man at Julia's nightclub in Miami Township. So they were both seeing other people, seemingly.
And yet the two of them still live together.
Yes, they still live together. And that's, there were some concerning text messages sent in the buildup to what ultimately happened.
What's her text?
So on August 28th, 2018, Bill's girlfriend allegedly, and this is from media reports and from what the police have said, allegedly said that Cheryl texted her asking that if Cheryl were to die, would she want to have a permanent relationship with Bill? Pretty bizarre thing to text. And detectives have said in the Dayton Daily newspaper, which did excellent coverage of this case, by the way, they're not convinced that she actually sent that. In addition to that, in September, Bill texted Cheryl thanking her for putting the nail in his coffin by divorcing him. And on September 24th, 2018, Cheryl's coworkers got a text saying, "I will be in tomorrow if I'm not dead." So, this all points to some bad things behind the scenes. Obviously, divorces are never easy and can often be contentious, or at least temporarily contentious. But most of the time, they don't result in anyone being harmed. Unfortunately, this is seemingly a different case. So, the last weekend in September of 2018, Bill and their 15-year-old daughter went to Florida for a vacation. So, nothing bad about that. But Bill also brought along his girlfriend. Now, family members have told the media that they don't think that Cheryl knew about that because she wouldn't have allowed it. She would have felt uncomfortable about that, or uncomfortable to say the least. They get back on Monday, October 1st, that evening. The next morning, Cheryl disappears. So October 2nd, 2018, Cheryl left the house at 7:15 with their daughter, dropped her off at Stebbins High School. That is the last time she's seen alive, and she vanishes. But it does seem like she got home safely.
How do we know that?
So around 7:35 a.m., according to the Cincinnati Enquirer, she's posting on Facebook. She posts a few times. By 7:45 a.m., the posts stop. Now, that day, surveillance footage around 10:52 a.m. captures her car being left in a lot near a Kroger, her 2016 Toyota Highlander.
Does this surveillance show who was driving the vehicle?
Unfortunately, it cuts off before before the driver gets out. But police have other surveillance footage from that morning, and that captures what they believe the person who was driving that car, a person dressed all in black, their hood's up, they're wearing white gloves and all black. And they say one of the surveillance footage shows the person walking towards Burkhart Road. At around 11:13 a.m. that morning, somebody called 911 in the area to report a suspicious man all in black. And in addition to that, the nearby Spinning Hills Middle School surveillance video from them captured a man the police believe is the same person walking to the back of the Coker home, and that there the white gloves can be very clearly seen. And later that day, surveillance footage also picks up Bill Coker in a local Kroger, and there seems to be an injury to his left elbow. So none of that is good. That day, Margie Keenan, who was Cheryl's sister, told the Dayton Daily News that she got a call from the Coker's 15-year-old daughter. She could not get in touch with her mom. So Keenan immediately realizes that something is very wrong because, her sister wouldn't leave her daughter like that. Keenan is the one to report her missing. The family, I imagine minus Bill, that the next day tracked down her Cheryl's vehicle using a Find My iPhone app, and police search it. They find Cheryl's phone in her backpack in the car. And that, again, doesn't sit right with anybody. She carried her phone everywhere. That doesn't make any sense. There's no sign of a break into the car. There's no signs of anything being amiss. Her purse, keys, like everything, credit card is inside. And the doors are locked. And this is all, just to give you a sense, if you're from that area, this is near a Kroger at the intersection of Spinning Road and Burkhart Road. So, yeah. Bill Coker talks to police. He also claims that $4,000 is missing from a shoebox that the couple, or the divorcing couple, hid in their closet. And he starts to say that he feels Cheryl ran away, stole the money. He makes comments to the press about how, he knows stuff about what she was doing, but, he doesn't want to say anything because he doesn't want to hurt their 15-year-old daughter. But she was engaging in high-risk behavior, essentially, is what he's putting out there.
And he ultimately, in 2019, he is named as a suspect.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a shock. So he's named as a suspect. On February 15th, 2019, Riverside police identify him as a suspect. And they also say that they believe Cheryl is dead and that she was not abducted by a stranger. News reports uncovered affidavits for search warrants for the Coker household. The Dayton Daily News reported on these, as did News Center 7. And the police wanted to look at furniture covers, cell phones, body fluids, computers, weapons, tools, chemicals, everything. And yeah, they were kind of digging into him pretty deeply from the beginning. Now, Bill, for his part of his protest, his innocence, he's never hurt anybody in his life, all that stuff.
Now, it turns out the police were correct, unfortunately, that she was deceased.
Yes, after numerous search attempts, including one from Texas EquuSearch, and even Riverside residents Jan Pitzer and Ashley Ferguson erecting a billboard for Cheryl, and just all these multiple searches, the Dayton News in April reported that on April 25th, 2020, a mushroom hunter discovered a skeleton in Greene County, Ohio. And this was on private property off a road. They were not buried. The 911 call from the mushroom hunter includes a description as basically seeing like a skeleton that appeared to be wearing cloth resembling pants and a sweatshirt. Now, the Montgomery County Coroner's Office ultimately used dental records and surgical records to identify this body, these remains, as Cheryl. The remains were so decomposed that unfortunately the autopsy could not identify exactly a cause of death, but the coroner ruled that homicidal violence was involved. So Riverside police were originally the agency on this, but In 2020, in that summer, the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation took over. Other agencies have also been involved, and Riverside remains involved day to day. Some other interesting facts about William Coker. His employer apparently was interviewed and talked about how he had seemingly scabs on his elbows, swollen knuckles. He's claimed that at least the hand injury was due to a forklift accident that he did not report at the time, apparently. Detectives have been through the bank accounts associated with the Cokers. Detective Travis Abney has stated that he believes that Coker was the last one in the house with her. Obviously, a lot of this points at Bill Coker. That being said, he has not been charged with a crime. He's very much innocent until proven guilty, especially in the absence of any charges. But I imagine that it's certainly understandable for a lot of us that Cheryl Coker's family members feel that he knows far more than he is saying, despite his repeated denials.
So this would be another one we will be keeping a very close eye.
Yeah, and if you have any insight into this case that you want to share with us, please send us an email at murdersheet@gmail.com. That's just, just tell us what you're hearing, or if you have any sort of on-the-ground intelligence, we'd be very interested in getting that. And just also, if you want more information, the Cincinnati Enquirer has done some good coverage of this, specifically the Accused podcast that's hosted by journalists there, and they did an in-depth dive. I'll include a link to their article on it. We also got some reports from the Coshocton Tribune, and the Daily, and the Dayton Daily News has been all over this. So they're, we reviewed a lot of their coverage on newspapers.com. So definitely check them out. They're doing a wonderful job keeping their readers updated about this troubling case. So that's all for the cheat sheet today. Thank you all so much for listening and putting up with my weird voice. I appreciate everybody's patience while get over this little head cold. But thank you for listening, and stay tuned for next week.
Thanks so much for listening to the Murder Sheet. If you have a tip concerning one of the cases we cover, please email us at murdersheet@gmail.com. If you have actionable information about an unsolved crime, please report it to the appropriate authorities.
If you're interested in joining our Patreon, that's available at www.patreon.com/murdersheet. If you want to tip us a bit of money for records requests, you can do so at www.buymeacoffee.com/murdersheet. We very much appreciate any support.
Special thanks to Kevin Tyler Greenlee, who composed the music for the Murder Sheet, and who you can find on the web at kevintg.com.
If you're looking to talk with other listeners about a case we've covered, you can join the Murder Sheet discussion group on Facebook. We mostly focus our time on research and reporting, so we're not on social media much. We do try to check our email account, but we ask for patience as we often receive a lot of messages. Thanks again for listening.